Hello Pico, how are you? We are dealing with some serious clouds out here, but the forecast says broken clouds. So I'm going to take a quick look at the CrB, and it's still there. That is on the west wing. I want to see what we can get on the east wing. I have DWARF 2 sitting on the west wing and DWARF 3 on the east wing. We're going to see if we can calibrate DWARF 3. And then see what's going on the east front. We still have not been able to get the comet. We have had cloudy mornings, 6 or 7 in a row now, and we'll keep trying every morning. Looks like DWARF 3 is having no problem calibrating. Success calibration. What's going on the east then? I am fine. I don't know what Saturn is going to look like. We certainly have Andromeda, but I'd like to look at Triangulum more so than Andromeda. And up north we have North America. I don't have either of them in an equatorial mount, so we do not have the luxury of looking at anything near Polaris. Let's see what Saturn looks like quickly. And in the meantime, let's see if we can get the two screens simultaneously up. Good evening, Matthew. How did you guys fare in with the hurricane the past couple of days? I hope everybody is safe. Okay, let's do some labeling here. I think Astrobiscuit used slightly bigger scopes than 1-inch apertures. Okay, this does look like Saturn. We should be able to give a shutter of a lot shorter than 1 second. Doesn't want to, okay. It is trying to look like Saturn. That's right, you're at Okitex. How are the skies down there? Bortle 1, 2. So the big news over the next 48 hours, whether Seestar is going to unveil teeny but no mighty, which means we will have missed a big opportunity of building something useful. And then we'll see what Vaonis is going to announce. Let's see if 15 seconds is doable. Okay, let's see if by rotating everything by 90 degrees, if we get more real estate here. Come on. Not much, but just a little bit. So we have triangle on the left with the dual band filter and TCRB on the right. Actually, there is room for a third dwarf in this case on the display. But we may be able to undo this one. And take advantage of it this way. And that'll do. Don't know if you can see TCRB, but it is right here at the tip of the arrow. This evening when I looked west, I don't know about 7 dwarfs. I don't know if you saw the guy who has already demolished 3 dwarf 2s, he has 4 so far. He keeps dropping them for some reason. So as I was saying, I was hoping that Seestar would unveil an 80mm or 100mm scope. It is looking more and more it would make an interesting video or a slideshow of pictures of demolished dwarfs. Do you have a picture of your dwarf being dropped from height? And if you do, can you send it to me, please? When I have my slideshow, I will protect your anonymity. This afternoon I was experimenting with hoisting Dwarf 2 on a 40-foot pole. In English that will be about 14 meters. This way it will clear the house and all the trees and would give me 360-degree view. And by using guy wires I should be able to keep it reasonably not you. Okay. There were pictures on Facebook yesterday of the latest way in which the Dwarf 2 has broken. Somebody picked it up off the table and the base stayed on the table, but the rest of the scope came out in his hand, and he posted a picture of all the wiring. Alright, I see a satellite trail on the Dwarf 3 image. We have been told that AI will detect and delete. Well, yours will be coming soon, I hope. 3 nights ago, Dwarf 3 showed its resilience to clouds by going a full hour without stacking a single frame, yet did not lose track of the target behind the clouds. And when the target reappeared an hour later, Dwarf 3 resumed stacking and did not miss a beat. Right now we are going with 15-second exposures without equatorial mount. It is an Alt-S mount, and let's see what the stars look like. Reasonably roundish, not bad. Not bad at all. There is some fuzziness on the top right and sharpness at the bottom left. But they're still reasonably round. Yeah, they are building them fast. I mean, they have been building them for a while. I'm still waiting for quite a few more app updates. There is going to be a schedule my night software whereby you pick your targets, schedule them, and let it run. I'd like to see the microphone turned on so we can capture the sounds of the night. In our case, it'll be owls and coyotes and crickets and frogs. The presets on Dwarf, I don't know if you noticed, I picked a preset on Dwarf 3. The presets already have darks taken. Not sure here if they are taking darks for a specific sensor or generic, and not sure if they're taking them for specific temperatures or ballparking it. But it did not ask me to take darks here on Dwarf 3. And we are about to start seeing the stars that are a signature of triangulum. Right now the weather forecast for tomorrow morning calls for broken clouds, which means it's going to be another touch and go whether we see the comet or not. We saw the comet on Saturday morning ever so briefly, not photograph quality by any means. in addition to the elusive comet 2023 A3 Tsuchinchan Atlas, there is the new moon that the Earth has acquired today that will be with us for 2 months before it shoots back out. Magnitude is about 23 right now, expected to drop all the way down to 18. Once we have a slightly clearer sky, we'll put the 11-inch on it and see if we can capture it. We'll go with very long guided exposures, and since it will be the only dot in the sky that will be moving, we will know with some degree of confidence whether we got it or not. And then I'd like to take another look at the James Webb Space Telescope. Jet Propulsion Lab JPL estimates that it is magnitude 13, which is very doable even on a Seestar. Pico, if you have a Seestar, you may want to look at K. Wang's Seestar ALP, ALP. He has written a driver that allows you to control Seestar from Stellarium. And I got it working. I followed his step-by-step guide. And that will allow you then to enter right ascension and declination into Seestar, which you cannot do otherwise. To those who have just joined us, welcome. We have broken clouds, which means it's going to be a touch and go night. On the right is Dwarf 2, Grumpy, looking at the CrB, not for long. Grumpy is sitting on the west wing ledge, and Dwarf 3 Happy is sitting on the east wing window ledge. Both are sitting on window sills basically. High up. Right now Dwarf 3 is going to tackle M33 for about an hour with an exposure of 15. That'll give us 4 per minute, so we're looking for at 240 stacks, so we're a quarter of the way there. And Dwarf 2, we're gonna get it off TCRB momentarily and pick a target due west and go for it. When I had the Dwarf 2 and Seestar, I would turn to Seestar for any deep sky imaging, except for a handful of targets that would not fit in the Seestar field of view. Now with Dwarf 3 and Seestar, it is really a toss-up. Dwarf 3 has 3 times the field of view of Seestar and almost the same quality. Seestar still has a sharper field of view, even though Dwarf has an 8 megapixel sensor and Seestar has a 2 megapixel sensor. Seestar is able to give you fewer arc seconds per pixel than Dwarf is. By not much, 2.3 versus 2.8 arc seconds per pixel. Just about a 20% difference, but that shows in the quality of the images. If you are taking images that are galaxies and clusters, if you're looking at nebula, the quality is almost the same, with Dwarf's field of view being 3 times that of Seestar. Plus Seestar has twice the glass surface area, or the aperture. Pico, if you had asked me this question 2 days ago, hello Pelouse, I would have said yes, but Seestar has been advertising a tiny telescope and they seem to be wanting to compete with Dwarf as opposed to going in the other direction. TCRB has not gone Nova yet, but I recorded a short 3-minute video asking if Betelgeuse has gone supernova, and we're waiting to see it. I did not realize that such a video will attract 5,000 views, so I'm happy with that one. Right now I'm looking at the west and trying to see what we have that might be worthwhile imaging with the Dwarf 2. I do not dare put the 2 dwarfs on the same side of the house because they get into an argument. So I have one on the east and one on the west. And the one on the west has clouds now. We can send it up and see what it will do with M13. We saw comet Tsuchinchan for a few seconds on Saturday morning through clouds, but not photograph worthy. The folks in New Zealand and Australia have gotten some good pictures of the comet. Okay, by moving to a different part of the sky, we have gotten out of the way of the clouds. So we're gonna cut the IR. We'll go with a shutter of 10 exposure, stay with 80 gain, and let's do it. Palus, are you gonna try to capture the new moon? big telescope. Because when I'm using the big telescope unguided, I try to go with 1 or 2 second exposure and take lots of frames and stack them. Yeah, I've tried it. I forgot that my Dwarf 2 doesn't like to have the IR filter turned off. All the stars become eggs. So we're gonna go resume that capture. And I've done 1 second exposure on both Dwarf 2 and Dwarf 3. I am back with a large coffee mug. So Dwarf 2 has done is doing well with Messier 13. And Dwarf 3 is taking its jolly time with Messier 33, which is what we expect. We're gonna let it run with it. Shouldn't matter how long it takes. What time does the moon rise tonight, Wilbur? The moon. Shouldn't be for a while. Moon rises at 4:46 a.m. So the moon is not an issue tonight. It's going to be preceding Tsuchinchan. Hello Larry, long time no see. Might as well update you on what's going on. Dwarf 2 is imaging Messier 13. Dwarf 2 is sitting on the west wing, west ledge, and Dwarf 3 is sitting on the east ledge. The sky is partially cloudy. Pico, my first week in Salford working on my PhD, I learned some interesting habits. The parking garage at the university opens at 8, so nobody could get to work before 8. They had to wait for the garage to open, and then they all arrived after 8. And then after chit-chatting and getting together, got to about 9 o'clock, it was time for a coffee break. Lights off, shut down the lab, everybody walked over to the cafeteria. Back by around 10:30 to prepare for lunch. So we shut down again at 11:30, went to lunch. Back around 1:30 to prepare for the 3 o'clock tea break. By the time we came back from that, we had to get out of there before the parking garage closes. They closed at 4, so we had to be out before them. And I tried to figure, when do people actually get work done? So I started sneaking in the weekend to get things done without being interrupted with coffee break, lunch break, tea break, and parking garage morning and evening. And boy did I get in trouble, and I was hauled into the dean's office because I rearranged the desks in my lab so I can have the equipment in a way in which I could actually use them. And there was an official complaint filed against me because that was a union job and students were not allowed, graduate students were not allowed to move desks. Larry, the hurricane remnants went south of us. We did not see any of it. Paluz, I did you one up. I went from university to government. It's almost 9 o'clock, time for station identification. For those who are just joining us, this is the Pompey Observatory. We are dealing with some broken clouds outside, so I went with two safe targets. M13 on dwarf 2, grumpy, and M33 on dwarf 3, happy. M13 has already shown quite a bit of the cluster. Dwarf 3 is going to be a while before we see much of M33. We're going with 15-second exposures and a gain of 60, so I'm not in a hurry. We'll let it show what it can do. Well, but when I joined academia, I was under the impression that I'll be there for 50 years, that I'll get tenure and teach 1 or 2 classes per semester, do my research. And then things happened for a reason. Life changed in 2001, and 2002 started the gradual transition. By 2003 I was out of, resigned my tenure and accepted a civil service position, and never regretted it, never looked back. I thought I would lose autonomy by going from academia to government, but that was not the case. I still had a lot of autonomy, and there was a lot less structure and a lot more meetings. I did not have to be in class 14 weeks, 3 hours per week at exactly the same time. But the deadlines that we had, and what they call them, suspense or suspenses, were on a different scale. Most requests will come on a Tuesday, and we had to get things done by the day before, by Monday. Are you your own boss, Pelouse? When Bill joins us, he will notice that we have 13 viewers but only 5 likes, and he's going to remind all of you to like, to click like, and if you're not subscribed, to please subscribe. So let's make Bill happy when he joins by seeing that the number of likes is not smaller than the number of concurrent viewers. So please click like and subscribe. Thank you. Yup, the water fountain banter is where most work got done. Or the coffee room. Hello Son Goku, long time no see. How have you been? Yes, I'm aware that the Seestar and the Vespera have the same size aperture, the same lens opening. Dwarf 3 apparently does not have any problem with DWO. We do not need to turn on the anti-DWO or the CPU mode, it does it automatically. The one thing I'd like from the Dwarf Lab engineers is a little display somewhere in the corner of the altitude and azimuth that the scope is looking at. It's not a functionally critical requirement, but it'll be nice to have a rough idea of where we are looking. And we are in Alt-Az mode, and it shows the field rotation is becoming evident on Dwarf 3. Okay, the number of likes and the number of concurrent viewers are equal, so that'll make Bill happy. We did not mean for people to drop out, we meant for people to click like, but we lost 7 viewers when we asked for for them to click likes. As they say, you can achieve any target by either reducing the numerator or increasing the denominator. So we're going to eliminate field rotation on dwarf 3, and it's gone. There is another satellite trail going through. Dwarf 3 is supposed to have AI to detect satellite trails in frames and not stack them. So Elon wins again. We're going to stack M13 for 30 minutes and then hop onto M27. Dumbbell should be within the field of view, or within the range of dwarf 2 at this point. It would fail Pico. This will be the equivalent of having it's turning the tripod under dwarf while dwarf is trying to track. Since dwarf is not doing any plate solving, it will miss out. I tried it actually with the moon by putting it in equatorial mode but not telling it that it's in equi mode, and it could not track the moon. As I mentioned early in the evening, 2 nights ago I think, we were trying to do LDN 1235, and we had clouds for a solid hour, yet dwarf 3 stayed locked on the target, and when the clouds moved out it resumed imaging and stacking without missing a beat. So it's tracking amazingly accurately. So our first attempt at the Dark Shark Nebula was not successful. It tracks my yard varmints as well. We had a surprise this morning. Near the garbage can outside the house, there were 4 murdered mice. They were obviously murdered, bloodied, and they were dropped near the garbage can. So whatever predator killed them did not want to eat them, but left them as presents. Son Goku, my wife is urging me to start visiting observatories and making videos on them. If we get going on that venture, then I will put Gail Rigsby definitely on my list. Hello, OpenEye. That's what everybody is thinking, that it could be a cat. A well-fed cat who was hunting for fun. I've been saying I'm just an engineer a lot lately. Whenever somebody poses a question in the comment that starts with why, I avoid answering it by saying, I'm an engineer, I concern myself with the what. I defer the why to scientists and philosophers. When I retired, I told everybody that there are 2 things that I will no longer answer. Questions that start with why, and the phone when it rings. Before the advent of answering machines and caller IDs, some of you may remember the old phones that you have to turn clockwise with every digit that you're dialing. That's what we had in the lab in the 1970s at the university in Salford. And whenever the phone rang, my supervisor would not answer it and would say, matter of factually, if it's important, they will call again. It took me a while to realize that it doesn't matter if they call again if he never answers the phone. What difference does it make if it's important or not, and if they call back or not? But that's a strategy that I have adopted in retirement. I don't answer the phone and I don't answer why questions. And in both cases, if it's important, they will call again. Where's M22 right now? Because we're done with M13. I was going to go to M27. Still going for M27. Yeah, M22 is in the southwest and it's a little bit too low for me, it's going down. It has, Dwarf 3 has stacked 212 images or frames, and it's trying to flesh out the outer parts of M33. I'm still seeing very subtle changes. I decided to try the dual band filter on M33. I may regret it, which is why we're not seeing much progress, but it's still stacking. So we're going to leave IR pass, gain of 80, and we'll go with 10 second. We'll give it about half an hour. M33 is changing. It is still stacking. Vaonis is making an announcement or a big unveiling on Tuesday, in 2 days. Their last two unveilings were both flops. Let's hope they fix it this time. I want them to announce a telescope that I cannot afford. I don't want everybody going for the bottom. DWARF has already demonstrated that with 2 lenses, DWARF 3 is an outstanding instrument. We may have the Draconids, I believe, meteor shower coming next weekend, and if the weather permits, I'm going to put DWARF 3 to work and see if we can get meteors with it. With a wide angle view and a probably a 1 or 2 second exposure should get us enough of a track And there's the dumbbell. Larry, if that's what they're going with, that's going to be a big disappointment. I mean, I'm reporting firsthand here. When I visited the Seestar booth, or the zoo booth at the NEAF, the Northeast Astronomy Forum, last April, one of their people, don't know, engineer or otherwise, told me in no uncertain terms that they have a large aperture team working on building a bigger Seestar, and it was not ready for the NEAF, but they were looking forward to unveiling it soon. By larger aperture, I assumed they meant larger than 50. I asked if it was 80 or 100, and she said, I cannot say, which is fair enough. But not 30, please. Paluz, my estimate is that the price will grow as the square of the aperture. Pico, the ad, I tried digging into the ad to see whether they mean they're unveiling two devices, a tiny and a mighty, or just tiny, and they're referring to S50 as the mighty. I measured the proportions of the mighty in the picture, and they matched those of the S50. I was hoping that there will be a major discrepancy, somehow that it'll be longer or fatter or wider or whatever. But the dimensions of mighty in the picture were very proportional to the S50. So don't know, still hoping that they will unveil two, one bigger, and I don't care about the one smaller. The tiny is the one that seems to have a second lens on top. Mighty was shown closed, so could not tell if it's S50 or something else. Unfortunately, telescope manufacturers, at least the smart telescope manufacturers, seem to use the moon as their guidance. That whatever they build must have a field of view larger than 30 arc minutes. I'd like them to go boldly with half of that. There are way more deep sky objects with the smaller field of view than the moon than there are deep sky objects with field of views larger than the moon. I mean, there is dumbbell, and if we were to go for the Ring Nebula, which is a beautiful, beautiful DSO, it's going to look tiny on these guys. A 16-inch scope with f10 and a small sensor would do justice. Why is your 6-inch scope on the sofa? Larry, you probably know that Stellina has a sensor rotator built into the telescope. That's the only smart scope with a field of view derotator. Pico, you can either learn Chinese or have Google translate for you. Then you can get a laugh for what they come up with in terms of translation. Yes, Pico, quite a few dwarf 3s have reached their targets or their owners, and everybody is posting pictures. Since Dwarf 3 came about, I have neglected my duties towards the University of Kent with the HOIS project, hunting for outbursting young stars. I used to dedicate about one night a week to capturing the 9 winter and 9 summer regions of young star formation, such as the Pelican Nebula and the Elephant's Trunk and the Cocoon. I need to get back to that before I get kicked off the team. I wonder if M33 is going to be a case of a galaxy that must be imaged with the dual band filter off. Basically visual mode, no filter at all. And since we are in experimental mode, might as well do that right away. We have stacked 270. I'm going to stop it. It should be with us for a long while, so we're going to go for it again without any filter. So no filter, and we're going to do the same preset 1560 4K and go for it. Jacob did due diligence with LDN 1235. Took several hours with and without filter, and concluded that that's one target that is best imaged with without any filter. Pico, no, Pompey Observatory is my private hobby after I retired. It is mostly in my backyard, but I have branched in two directions. One, I hold a visiting scholar appointment at the State University of New York in Oswego, where I operate their 16-inch telescope and their observatory. Said telescope is sick right now. We're trying to fix it. And part of that visiting scholar appointment, I contribute to both research and teaching at the university in the astronomy program, physics and astronomy department. And the other venture is the University of Kent HOYS project, to which I contribute data. Palouse, the most important letter in your entire post is the S after product. But something wrong with the English. It says new products is not. So we're talking about multiple products and poor English, or a single product and poor English. Yes, I'm retired and busy. I have a lot more autonomy and flexibility now in deciding what to do, as in which targets to image and what telescopes to use. Before I retired, I was putting in 50, 60, 70 hours a week at work, and then getting to the telescopes if and when I had a chance. That has flipped the other way around. Looks like M33 is stacking a lot more quickly with the filter out of the way. Pico, I plan to die with my boots on. I used to say die with my running shoes on. Palouse, it looks like it is the S50, the Mighty. That's what I said. I measured width and height, and they conform to those of the S50. Pico, plus I have 8 grandchildren to enjoy, none of them close enough to see regularly, but we get to talk to them and Google Meets with them, and we see them a few times a year. I'm working on an AI program that will set the optimum parameters given a target. And here's a good example. M33 is screaming no filter. With only 21 frames, it's already looking better than 270 frames with the dual band filter on. That's not going to be the case with any nebula. And for those who just joined us, welcome on board. If you're not subscribed, please subscribe to the channel. We'd love to have you join us more often. And if you like what you see, click on like. This is the Pompey Observatory, and we're imaging live the Dumbbell Nebula M27 on a DWARF 2 telescope and M33 Triangulum Galaxy on a DWARF 3 telescope. Once we get a couple of good nights, clear skies, no clouds, I plan to do diligence in comparing the Seestar S50 to the DWARF 3 on some of the more challenging targets. So far they have been very, very close. So if you'll indulge me for a moment, I'm going to show you quickly what we did comparing D2 and D3 and then comparing D3 and S50. So I'm going to take over the screen for a moment. Okay, there we go. $600 below the sea. Okay, so this is the helix nebula with the dwarf 2. That's with the dwarf 3. This is the Heart Nebula with dwarf 2, and that's dwarf 3, totally unprocessed. This is Andromeda M31, dwarf 2, dwarf 3, M34, dwarf 2, dwarf 3, and then California Nebula, and this is where you'll see the big difference. That's D2 and that's D3, again unprocessed. And if we look at comparing dwarf 3 with the S50, back to Helix, and that's the Seestar. That is the Orion complex of Flame and Horsehead, and that's Seestar. I like the spikes on the stars with the Seestar. That is the Heart Nebula. Yes, the D3 filter really works. And that is that's the difference in the field of view. The height of Seestar is the same as the height of the dwarf 3, 1 degree or slightly more. That is the Sol Nebula with the dwarf 3 and with Seestar. That is the Cocoon Nebula with dwarf 3 and with Seestar. And then that's M1 Crescent. And that's Andromeda with the dwarf 3 and with Seestar. And finally M42. The dwarf 3 with the filter on cleaned up the field of view quite a bit, and that is Seestar. M81, M82 with dwarf 3 and with Seestar, and Pac-Man Nebula NGC 281 D3 and then Seestar. And then California. Veil. $73.80. And that's it. I do not dare put these sorry about the ads. I do not dare put these comparisons in a video and publish yet, because I have not done the due diligence in making sure the stretching is the same and the total exposure length is identical. And can you see Finland from Aberdeen? Northern Lights. Oh yes. Yeah, I'm looking at the aurora forecast. It's too far north from us, but definitely Scandinavia is deep in it. I wonder if album will let me look at the previous image. So this was M33 that we just took. And that's M33 that we are taking now. What is the latitude in Aberdeen? 53, 54? $57. Okay. So they are quite a bit further north from us. Yep. We are at 43 here. So you get a lot more darkness in winter. Does it mean that you can get more of the Messier catalog in one night? Or are you too far north to get all of them? So dumbbell is reaching completion. Let's see who's gonna take next. We have a fascinating possibility here, and we may be able to get C63 on both at the same time. It's worth a try. I know that Dwarf 3 can't see it. I'm going to see if Dwarf 2 can get it. Otherwise we'll hop onto M2, which is not as exciting. And we're going to make them identical as much as possible. 15, 60 and infrared pass, and let's go for it. The only thing that's going to be different is the filter, just to see, just to show the difference in real time with and without the dual band. DWARF 2 is already 5 frames ahead in stacking. We'll just keep that in mind, because I think DWARF 2 will keep stacking faster. I don't know if DWARF 3 will ever catch up, but we'll see. Palouse, I'm thinking exactly that. I would love to do a Caldwell marathon of sorts. And the nice thing about Caldwell is we may be able to do them in order. C1, C2, C3, etc. Alright, you can see the difference immediately with and without the dual band with C63. For those who just joined us, this is the Pompey Observatory, and we're looking at DWARF 2 and DWARF 3, looking at the same target, the Helix Nebula C63, and in both cases we are deploying as much filter as the telescope allows. DWARF 3 we're using the dual band filter, DWARF 2 we're using the IR filter. Pico, you want me to go to my Facebook to see what's there? Yup. Hello, Paulette. Paulette, there are two lessons to be learned here. One, glass has its privileges, and you can tell that dwarf 3 is gathering twice as much light as dwarf 2. Both have same gain, same exposure, same target. Hey, you can tell people to visit anything you want. I do not have an Instagram account, but feel free to point them to yours. Son Goku, I am not the government, so I don't censor anything. You're welcome to publish anything you want on my channel. You may have noticed that when we started on Dwarf 3, Dwarf 2 was 5 frames ahead. Now it is 10 frames ahead. What this is telling us is both 4K, both same target, and Dwarf 2 is stacking at about twice as fast as Dwarf 3. Thanks for asking. You're welcome. I'm glad you joined us tonight. I'm glad you join us often. Paulette, we're trying to compare side by side Dwarf 2 and Dwarf 3 on the same target right now. And there are several lessons, quick lessons. Dwarf 2 is stacking a lot faster, and Dwarf 3 is showing a lot more definition of the nebula. When we are done, I'll have to double check that Dwarf 2 is indeed at 4K, because if it's only at 2K, that would explain the twice the speed of stacking. But the filter is very evident here. Guys, as soon as we mentioned government, the viewership dropped in half. So let's stick to more pleasant things, like clouds. No, Dwarf 3 is not twice the speed of stacking, it's slower. No, both are 4K, so that does not explain it. Yes, tinfoil hat, we need that. Uh-oh. Looks like clouds have moved in. We are capturing but not stacking. Let's keep an eye on that. Dwarf 3 is at 27 stacked and Dwarf 2 is at 38. Fingers crossed. No, they're both batteries are full. It's the SD card that's half empty. The SD card on the Dwarf 2 is only 64 gig. On Dwarf 3 it's 128 gig. But the green symbol is the battery. Right now neither of them is stacking because of clouds, but apparently each of them is spending 15 seconds to capture, and then Dwarf 2 is only taking a couple seconds to stack. Dwarf 3 is taking more like 4 seconds to stack. Okay, they are stacking again. Good. That's one thing I like about Dwarf that Stellina would not give me. When Stellina gets several frames without stars and cannot stack them, it will just declare the end of the capture and call it a night. Dwarf will just in an automatic robotic manner just keep trying to stack, and if there are no stars it'll toss it out and take the next one, try again, no star, toss it out, and repeat. Let's see what Astrospheric says. Astrospheric says we're going to have a short night. That was not the forecast that they gave us a few hours ago. Okay. With some hope for the morning, possibly capturing the comet. It is 10:17 p.m. and we are at 40 stacked on Dwarf 2 and 28 stacked on Dwarf 3. Gonna give it 15 minutes. If we don't stack any, I will wish you a good night, and then we'll reconvene in the morning looking for the comet. The astrospheric is not too hopeful for the rest of the evening. Can't help you with the MacBooks. I am a Windows and Android with stacking again. Looks like it. One of them is stacking. By the way, Dwarf 2 is connected in station mode, and Dwarf 3 we're connecting directly to its own hotspot, because when I put them both on the same network in station mode, they get into a disagreement. The Dwarf Lab folks alerted me to the problem when a Dwarf 2 and a Dwarf 3 are on the same network, both in station mode. They did not tell me why it could be an issue, and I wonder whether it's a labeling of the packets that is the problem, that one of them is taking away packets intended to the other, or vice versa. So Dwarf 2 has added has stacked 3 more frames, but Dwarf 3 has not stacked any. The big question here is how much pipelining is taking place between capture and stack. Since they are two separate processes with not much in common, the sensor could certainly be capturing for 15 seconds while the processor is stacking the previous frame that had been captured. And it's that overlap, or that ability to capture and stack at the same time different frames is what allows them to go fast. D3 is stacking again, so both are stacking, so we're back in business. At the end of the day, you have three resources. You have processor, input output, and storage. And it's going to be a trade-off among the three. And DWARF has done a good job on that trade-off. So has Seestar actually. Stellina not that much. To know some about the Vesperas, the 3 or 4 different models that are out. I'm waiting for Tuesday, hoping to hear an announcement of a Stellina 2 or something bigger than Stellina. Hestia was a flop. A series of Vesperas, it's arguable whether, what did they call that one? Passenger, and then 2, and then Pro. Bye-bye, Palouse. Good seeing you. Wish you a good night. If you pay attention to the circle around the the red square, that indicator that we are capturing and stacking. In the case of dwarf 3, as soon as it reaches the bottom, the current will change, but stacked is not changing until it gets to about 3 o'clock. There it is, it just changed. So at 6 o'clock the current will change, and then the stacked will not change until about 3 o'clock, which is about 10 seconds later. In the dwarf 2, on the other hand, both occur simultaneously at exactly 6 o'clock. It did not stack at this time. When it does not reject it, okay, it made a liar out of me. But I've been observing it, and it was stacking at the same time. Good night, John. It is interesting how the dual band filter attenuates pretty much all the stars that are emitting whitish light. And accentuates the red and the green, the oxygen 3 and the hydrogen alpha. So we have stacked 15 minutes worth on dwarf 3. And 20 some minutes on dwarf 2. I'm going to try to give about half an hour of stacked time for each of them. And then when we're done with that, M45 Pleiades will be very nicely situated for dwarf 3. Maybe a good target to tackle. The question becomes, what do we do with the filters? Let's ask Google AI Gemini what filters to use. According to Google AI, RGB filters are best for imaging the Pleiades. Given that the Pleiades has a magnitude of just over 1, very, very bright cluster or collection of stars, we have time to attempt with and without the dual band filter and see the difference quickly. So Dwarf 2 will retire after it gets to 120 stacked. With the helix. And then we'll retire Dwarf 3 when it gets to 120 stacked. Sorry, we will stop C63 at 120, and then we will do about half an hour each on the Pleiades with and without the dual band filter. And that is all contingent on the clouds allowing us to do our work. We stopped stacking again. We are at 83 stacked for the Dwarf 3 and 115 stacked for the Dwarf 2. Same exposure, same gain. Twice as much glass with the Dwarf 3 as the Dwarf 2. And the hydrogen alpha and oxygen 3 dual band filter on Dwarf 3. And only the IR filter on Dwarf 2. We are at 10:43. If we go 15 minutes without stacking anything, we will wish everybody a good night. In the meantime, thank you all for joining us. This was an unexpected surprise that clouds allowed us to do this much imaging over the past 3 hours. We did CrB, M33, M13, M27, and now C63. And to those who just joined us, this is the Pompey Observatory with more live streaming of DSO imaging than most channels on YouTube. Right now we are focused on understanding the capabilities of the Dwarf 3 and waiting with bated breath the announcements by Seestar and Vaonis next week of their new telescopes. But for now, on the left is Dwarf 3, and on the right is Dwarf 2 on the Helix Nebula C63. D2 has resumed stacking. It's not looking good. Hello One Mind Productions, thanks for joining us. Unfortunately, the clouds are not going to let us finish our experiment. But we're looking at Dwarf 2 and Dwarf 3 side by side, same target, same exposure, same gain, same clouds. So it's looking like the forecast is for it to get cloudier. We may have a break in the clouds in the morning. So if you want to join us back at around 6 a.m. Eastern, we'll be attempting to locate the comet. Looks like one of the dwarfs is trying to make a liar out of me. We're going to retire Dwarf 2 anyway at 120 stacked, so it's getting there. And then if Dwarf 3 does not do any more stacking, we will call it a night. If Dwarf 3 resumes stacking, then we're going to move over to the Pleiades M45 and see whether it works best with or without the filters. Hello Tariq. You're not late, we are early. We started the evening with very little hope of any clear skies. Oh, I am sure they will. Dwarf Lab is doing very well. Just like every car company, you have new models coming out every year. I would not be surprised if they are already working on a Dwarf 4. Tonight we had very little hope of clear skies, but we still managed over the past 3 hours to look at TCRB and make sure it's still there. We look at that M33 with and without filters, and we learned that M33 will image much better without the dual band filter than with. We took M13 and M27 with Dwarf 2, and now we're looking at C63 with both Dwarf 2 and Dwarf 3, and what a difference. Glass has its privileges. And at this point, looks like I will be wishing you guys a good night, and I will attempt again first thing in the morning to look for the comet. But we have gone 15 minutes without stacking anything, and I'm looking outside. I don't see a single star in the sky. Clouds have indeed taken over. So for now, so long from the Pompey Observatory.